So we've got 3 short talks today on the theme. We've got Singhashri, we've got Keval Shah, and we've got Karim Manji. And we're going to be going in that order. So firstly, we're going to have Singhashri, who some of you might recognize if you've been going to the morning meditations that Singhashri's been running. Singhashri's based in London and part of the North London Buddhist Centre, works for Breathworks, and also runs their own project called The Radical Embrace as well. So you might be familiar with Singhashri. So we're going to kick off with them about now. Singhashri, welcome.
Oh, thanks so much, Kalanandi. Yeah, I really appreciate your labor there to get us up and running. Yeah, thank you so much. And just want to say thank you to the whole Buddha Field team for putting on this amazing event. I've just been so impressed in all the preparation and how it's gone so far. And yeah, really also so appreciative to everyone showing up here. So lovely to see some familiar faces, some friends, and also lovely to see some new faces. So welcome to everybody. And please, yeah, just to reiterate, do what you need to do to be comfortable during this time. You could even lay down if that felt good to you, or yeah, just feel free to move, change shape. I don't feel like you have to be on top of the computer the whole time. So yeah, I'm going to be talking on this theme, A Beautiful Dream. I spent most of the day yesterday writing a very good, tight Dharma talk on the theme. And then I read it to my partner, who some of you might know, Shraddha Siddhi, last night. And they said, that's very dharmically precise, but I think you should just speak personally. So I've thrown out the talk, and I'm just going to speak personally and trust that that's what needs to happen. So I want to first just start by locating myself in the landscape of humanity, because as Kalanandi said, I live in London, but you can probably tell from my accent that I'm not British. So I'm American. I was born to Chilean immigrants who came over to Boston during the political unrest in Chile in the 70s. I was fed a story my entire childhood that one day we would be going back to South America, and that never ended up happening. So the situation in Chile continued to devolve, and there was never an opportunity for my family to move back. So I also identify as queer. So I feel very much like my entire life has had this kind of theme of around belonging and home and place. And lately I've been framing it as feeling in between. I often feel in between worlds. So for example, after I graduated from university, I moved to San Francisco, and I got very involved in people of color activities there as someone who identifies as Latinx. When I moved to Britain, all of a sudden I became white, and that was quite interesting. So I started to get, not that I wasn't aware of light skin privilege before then. I used to work in higher education on racial justice and equity issues, so I'm very familiar with the landscape. And I have done a lot of work around my own light skin privilege over the years, and I'm very familiar with how it is to walk in the world as someone with light skin. But I hadn't yet had this experience of having whiteness projected onto me so fully until I came to the UK, where there just aren't as many people of Latin background. I have now connected with quite a few in London, but it's just interesting how, you know, these locations do shift and change depending on where you are in the world, and also how you identify and how much we know about our own histories and about the histories of other peoples. So I wanted to frame that because a lot of how I teach and what I say comes from that grounding in my own background and experience, and explorations around identity and how important identity is, and also how interesting, sort of similar to what, if you were listening to the talks yesterday, Kalanandi was talking about, you know, this question of, you know, well, surely if you're a Buddhist and you're trying to let go of identity, then it's a backward step to actually want to ground in a certain identity, or to find oneself in a certain location. So sometimes I say, I am a Buddhist, but I'm also a queer Latinx Buddhist, and that is who I am. That's how I manifest in the world. Yeah, so it's important to name that. And it does fit with this theme around how compassion arises out of emptiness, which I might get to say something about a little later. I'm not sure if I'll have time. So I wanted to start with a personal story of a time when I was going off on retreat. And I had a lot going on in my life, and I was aware that I was probably going to end up at some point on this retreat, which was an intensive meditation retreat, coming into contact with a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions. And I was at a particular point in my practice where it felt appropriate for me to actually try and come into relationship with those emotions from a point of view or from an intention to not automatically know what was going on. So to not kind of decide, oh, that's anger, and kind of paste the anger label on top of the emotion and then have that all sorted out and kind of over there. I know what that is. I know what that's about. And just try and move into a relationship with what was emerging in my experience from a point of view of like completely not knowing. Like, how would it be to just not have any idea what this collection of quite intense sensations and thoughts, associated thoughts and emotions, what that was. And there was something in me that intuited that that might be an interesting approach to take. So I got on this retreat, and it was a pure awareness retreat, so just sitting practice. Some of you might be familiar with this practice where there's no particular focus of awareness. It's more that we're opening to the qualities of awareness that are sort of instantly available to us when we begin to get curious in them. So rather than focusing on any one aspect of what's arriving, sort of holding a broad open awareness, allowing all of experience to come and go in this broad open awareness. And noticing, one of the instructions in this way of working is noticing whether or not there's a self that's having the experience that's unfolding. So I was doing a lot of these kinds of investigations into who's having this experience right now. And there was a point in the probably midway through the retreat where when I went to look for, the Singhashri that's sitting there having the experience, I really couldn't find a person having the experience. So all that I could sense was that there was just experience, And even that's not really adequate. So it was a bit beyond words, but it was clear that the idea of a me who's having experience had dropped away, even if it was just temporarily. And in the moment of seeing that clearly, I immediately felt what I would normally or historically or habitually call fear. So all of a sudden there was this very familiar set of sensations in the belly, quite strong, a lot of contraction, and this kind of what I had already identified in my practice and given a name to. And I called this experience the dreaded demon doubt. So the dreaded demon doubt had appeared in my meditation. And almost instantaneously with the fear appearing came this reminder, this other part of me that was like, remember Singhashri, you set an intention at the beginning of this retreat. You weren't going to know what your experience was. So I said, yes, okay. So if this, I think this is fear, I've called this fear, I've called this the dreaded demon doubt and previously in my life, but maybe I don't know what this is. Maybe if I was able to sort of turn towards and begin to lean into this experience and get curious about what's here, maybe there's something else going on that I could open to. So I did a lot of deep breathing into the belly. I sat with the sensations. I brought to mind Padmasambhava, who's a being that one of the Buddhas that I personally like to contemplate. And it was very interesting what started to happen. So I won't tell you the whole story, because obviously I want you to have your own. If you get to a point in your practice where you come across fear or any other strong emotion, I'd like you to have your own unfolding. But what I will say is that what I ended up dropping into through that process was sensing a very old story about there being something wrong with me. And once I was able to see through the kind of emptiness of that story, and the fear that had been protecting me from really feeling that feeling of wrongness, what I ended up opening into was this actually really, really tender sense of my own deep sensitivity, actually, and that and there was something very true and real about that deep sensitivity. And it was also incredibly heartbreaking to open to it. So there was something in me that had to kind of crack open in order to allow myself to feel that deep sensitivity. And I knew that this sensitivity was in a way my birthright. It was sort of what the ground of all of that other stuff had kind of cropped out of my own diluted coping mechanisms and strategies to try and protect myself from my own sensitivity, from this truth of sensitivity, the sensitivity of awareness. So I tell you that story as an example of how if we can bring this intention of, holding provisionally, yes, there is a self here that's managing my life, that's having experience, that's deciding that they want to wake up, for example. That we also have to hold the paradox of, in order for that awakening to happen, that sense of self also needs to, we need to be willing to completely let go of and allow that to also transform and change. And we don't get to decide how that happens. We don't, as my preceptor Vivek often says, I can't curate my own awakening. I can't decide when certain aspects are going to fall away and what's going to arise out of that falling away. But what I can do, and this is what I deeply trust in, is that process does allow for a deeper compassion and resonating and vibrating with the world to arise. So that when we're less defended and less in this kind of protective mode, what becomes available to us, ironically, is the kind of promise of that deep heart wish to feel. To really feel, not just know intellectually, but to actually be able to fully embody solidarity with all living beings, the truth of interconnectivity. So this connection, I think I framed the question around this talk, A Beautiful World, as, how does compassion arise out of emptiness? So if we can, truly penetrate emptiness as a fully embodied realization, not just an intellectual exercise, but fully feeling into the fact that we're totally and completely connected to everything and everyone, then through that we open to, first our own deep heart wish to be free from suffering and for others to be free from suffering, but then also all of that energy that had been kind of used up in the blocking and the protecting becomes available to us now to act. To respond to that suffering. And that can be an incredibly spontaneous manifestation. So again, it's not like we decide to act. It's like action is just the natural thing that comes from that deep seeing through. So in her talk on Buddha Day, so Viveka gave a talk on the Buddha as social revolutionary. Kamanandi, feel free to wave at me if I'm talking for too long, because I forgot to check the time before I started. So she quoted the Zen teacher Norman Fisher. This is where the title of this talk came from. He was being interviewed, and he was being asked, well, if everything's an illusion, then what's the point of even trying to respond to the injustices of the world, the suffering of the world? And he responded, even though all of life and the world we live in is an illusion, a dream, why not make it a beautiful dream? Why not make it a beautiful dream? And this, for me, is very much also evocative of the words of Martin Luther King Jr. around, having a dream for a world where racism, injustice, poverty, environmental degradation, all of that has been eradicated. So when we first of all imagine a world like that, and then how can we support manifesting a world like that, even if it's all an illusion? It's like, well, what's the world we want to wake up into? What's the point of all this Buddhist practice if the world we're waking up into is one where racial injustice abounds and the earth is dying all around us? And also, like, are we, I don't know, like, I don't feel like I can be fully liberated until all beings are fully liberated. And that the liberative energy that is manifesting within me is the same liberative energy manifesting in people who simply want to be free, not just in a dharmic context, but just in any way in which we're held back from manifesting our full potential. That is the same energy. So I want to say something about Black Lives Matter. So I've been taking a course with this wonderful woman in the States, this Black teacher from the IMS tradition. Her name is Spring E. Washam. You may have heard of her. And it was a course that she's offered through her own inspiration and connection with Harriet Tubman, who, if you don't know who Harriet Tubman is, you can Google her and learn all about her. I'm not going to say much. She was an enslaved person in the States who worked to liberate herself and others from slavery. So she dedicated her whole life to abolition, basically. And lots of people relate to her as kind of a modern day bodhisattva who worked tirelessly towards liberation, freedom for herself and others. And on this course, Spring was reflecting on Black Lives Matter, and she was saying that she, more and more, the more she reflects on those three words, the more that she connects with these three words as if they were a Zen koan. And I just find that really, really inspiring that she said that she's framed it that way. So what she was talking about was the program of white supremacy and how we've all been programmed to be racialized within a world where white supremacy is the kind of organizing principle. There's other organizing principles, but that's the one that she was talking about and that the course is concerned with. And she was saying that Black Lives Matter, as soon as you hear or see it written, it just interrupts the program by immediately throwing up and showing us where we still feel separated or cut off from something, some aspect of our own experience, something about the world around us, other people. So no matter what happens to us when we hear those words, there's a teaching there that we could get interested and curious about. There's something calling for our attention. And it's not a surprise that those three words evoke a lot for a lot of people, a lot of different responses, depending, again, on people's locations, their political leanings, how they view the world, their conditioning, their own biases. And I name that for myself. As soon as she said it, actually, what came to mind for me was I've got a Black Lives Matter sign in my window. And the first time I went out of my house after I put it up, I was very proud of myself. I turned around and I looked at the sign, and I immediately felt fear. I thought I was going to feel proud. I thought I was going to feel, here I am, letting the world know that I support Black liberation. And instead I felt fear. And then I had to look into, well, what's that about, Singhashri? Why do you feel fear when you make, when you make a statement, come out in a certain kind of way, expose yourself. So yeah, I would just invite, all of what I just said might be very challenging to you, or you might be like, yeah, I agree with that, or you're somewhere in between all that. So I just invite you to just keep feeling into, like, as Buddhists, anytime there's resistance is fertile. Resistance shows us where the work is left to do. So you could take that on. I'd encourage you to take that on. So I'll just say one more thing and then I'll end, because I think I'm probably over my time now. So the last thing I'll say is, on that same course, I was in a small group. We were exploring, if we were ever put in a position where we had to put our bodies on the line to protect other people, would we do it? Because Harriet Tubman actually was put in that position over and over and over again. And we were exploring themes around nonviolence, and is it possible to act externally violently but from a place of love and compassion in order to protect life? And I said, I'd like to think, my ideals and my values tell me, yeah, of course I would. But I don't know. I can't say for sure I would. And this other participant, who I'm deeply grateful to in the group, said, well, I think if you're practicing every day and you're rooting in awareness and love, and you're continuing to kind of rehabituate in that direction, the hope would be that in that moment of intensity, that all that practice would come to fruition, and you'd respond out of the kind of fruit of all those efforts that you put in. And I found that something in what she said felt true. It dropped right into the heart center, and I found that really inspiring. I thought, oh yeah, that's a good reason to just keep going at it day after day. You know, keep bringing awareness to every sensation, the thoughts and emotions arising, the shame that comes up when I know I haven't acted in line with my values. You know, committing to apologizing and making repairs and reconciliation when I've harmed myself or others. All of that work that we do, to keep doing it, even when it feels boring, even when there's resistance, even when it doesn't feel like anything's changing, and trusting that then in the moment when we need it, our practice will come to bear. So that's my last kind of, I just want to like give you a charge, which is keep going, keep practicing. You don't have to have anything figured out. Intention is incredibly powerful, and we need people to wake up now. Like, the world can't wait another however many lifetimes you think it's going to take you to wake up. Wake up now and just start doing it. Start manifesting your bodhisattva activity today in whatever way. You know, it could be really small. It could just be like telling another friend about a racist thought that you had and how appalled you were. You know, just start opening, start manifesting the beautiful world that you want to see out there in your own mind, in your own relationships with other people, and trust that that will continue to radiate out in really surprising and delightful ways. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Singhashri. So we can do the kind of the quiet, unheard clap, which looks a bit like this, or the deep thanks, the bow of gratitude, or both. Just lovely. Just lovely. I always love hearing Singhashri talk. They just have a lovely way of weaving in so many teachings through every single sentence that they speak. There was so much magic in there. So I love the bit about not being able to choose how our process will manifest. I thought that was really, really great. Yeah, we don't get to choose how this thing unfolds and happens. And the real call to us at the end to wake up now. And something I've heard Singhashri say before a lot as well, this whole idea of just getting curious, being curious about our experience. So, so many gifts in there, Singhashri. Thank you so much. And if people find that they've had questions arising from what Singhashri has said, just make a note of them on a bit of paper, and you can add them into the chat for the questions later on. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Singhashri. Now, throughout that, I have let a few more people in that were waiting because I thought, well, I don't want them to miss out. So we have had some people arrive. So if you arrived while Singhashri was talking, that's the first of 3 talks that are happening. Next up, we're going to have Keval, and then we're going to have Karim. And after Keval, we will have a 5-minute comfort break. So Keval is going to speak from his experience, I believe, of working with Karuna, quite an impressive charity that works alongside people in India. And the title of Keval's talk is Karuna, Compassion Beyond Buddhism. So I'm going to hand over to Keval now. Welcome.
Hey, can you hear me? And can you see my slideshow? Great. Okay, good. So you'd have to look at my face. Oh, that's, you know, it's very nice anyway. But look, I've got to fess up to a few things. Like, the first thing is, you know, I don't really think of myself as a sort of Dharma guy, gives Dharma talks or whatever. Like, so, you know, I'm not going to do that. And what I am is somebody who works for Karuna, who likes to talk about our work and promote it. So I'm going to do that, you know, and really, you know, try and link it to the theme. And then I guess the other thing I am is somebody who doesn't really know how to give presentations. So I just got a whole bunch of pictures that I really like and put them all in a row. And then I'm just going to like talk over them because I think they're quite interesting and nice pictures. I hope that it links enough to the theme, but yeah, it's not really like in a way it's from my experience, but it's kind of from my thinking. I just completed a master's degree in South Asian studies, so this is all kind of relevant to that and my work for Karuna. Anyway, I'm going to start off with this quote that I heard. There you go. This guy Ken MacLeod, Vajrayana, Western Vajrayana teacher. People may or may not have heard of him. This was just on a podcast that I was listening to recently, and it really struck me. So he said on this, being interviewed by Michael Tuft, this guy on the Deconstructing Yourself podcast, he said, insight does not help you to free yourself from karmic conditioning. The only quality that does is compassion. The reason for that is that compassion puts you in touch with suffering, wherever it occurs, however it occurs. So you see and understand people's pain, where people in the culture will say, that's just the order of things. So they won't see it as a problem. When you develop a relationship with compassion, you don't have that luxury. And I think that's really powerful. So there's, obviously he doesn't mean insight in the sense of the full awakening that includes compassion. But, if we think about it in the sort of relative term of like, there are different aspects of our mind that we can develop, or different aspects of the path, really putting emphasis on the compassion aspect in this way and for this reason. So, the idea that it puts you in touch with suffering wherever it occurs, however it occurs, I think is sort of, in a way, relevant to the story of Karuna. So Karuna is the Sanskrit word, Pali and Sanskrit word for compassion. And, for people who don't know, we're a Buddhist NGO that works in India and Nepal at the moment, in South Asia generally, with the most marginalized communities. So I'm just going to tell a story really of Karuna with this in mind. Now, the reason that Ken MacLeod said that about compassion and insight, one of the things he was talking about was the way that Japanese monks, who were supposedly, some of them had very profound and deep insight experiences during the Second World War, were responsible for supporting a lot of atrocities and nationalism that took place during the war. And, there's a kind of something to contemplate there, that they could at the same time have these mystical experiences and also were not, engaged in behavior that was similar to like crusaders or something like that. And this is a theme that I'll kind of circle back to. So just to give some context, my talk, my work, my interest takes place in this area, this sort of area of like historical importance for Buddhism. And Karuna works primarily in India, but also has worked in, works in Nepal, worked in Bangladesh. And so try and keep this region in mind as I move through the slides. And Karuna's story really begins with, I'm sorry if a lot of people already know this stuff anyway, but really begins with Dr. Ambedkar. So in 1956, after a lifetime of fighting for the liberation and recognition of the rights of Dalit peoples, that is, those who were considered untouchable in India, Dr. Ambedkar, in a sort of culmination of his career, political career, and so career as an activist, led a mass conversion, converting hundreds of thousands of people to Buddhism as a means of escaping their social status as lesser, as inferior, and really emphasizing the Buddha as social revolutionary there, and the Buddha's kind of sense of equality and the anti-caste ideology that you get in the Buddha's teachings, early teachings. Sangharakshita, the founder of Triratna, this is just me showing nice pictures basically. Sangharakshita, the founder of Triratna, was one of the monks who was around at that time and was, important in teaching Buddhism to these newly converted Buddhist communities. In 1967, he founded the FWBO, or the WBO, which became Triratna in the UK. And 10 years later, he sent some of his students back to India to make contact with those Indian students that he'd had in the 50s and 60s. So this is Lokamitra and I think Purna in 1977 in their robes in India. So very Buddhist looking. This is them visiting Nalanda Monastery, the ruins of Nalanda Monastery. So they went there with this intention, like, oh yeah, we've set up this Buddhist movement. Maybe it'll be good to take it there and teach people about Buddhism and stuff. And when they got there, they found that these communities, of course, they'd converted, but they still lived in incredible poverty and suffered terrible discrimination. So they couldn't just teach people to meditate or whatever. And so quickly started social projects. So this is an early picture. This is Virabhadra weighing a baby, I guess, which is probably an important thing to do. And, you know, Karuna's early work was really supporting those Buddhist communities to set up social projects, medical dispensaries, kindergartens, creches, educational projects and so forth. The educational hostels that we ended up having like 15 or so of, trying to provide all kinds of different material and social benefits to people alongside kind of Triratna's Dharma teaching work, you know. So we were supporting all these projects in the early days, and also supporting the, this is Dada Rinpoche, one of Sangharakshita's teachers, so supporting a Tibetan refugee school that Dada Rinpoche set up. So, you know, you've got a couple of different Buddhist communities here in South Asia. Again, it's, you know, beautiful pictures. And, you know, we still support all of that work. So we support a lot of the Buddhist social work, Ambedkarite Buddhist social work, and we still support ITBCI school, which is Dada Rinpoche school. Here's a more recent picture. As you can see, we help both happy and scared children. And so we continued, you know, to expand as an organization, and we, you know, our fundraising activities here were doing very well. We were active in South Asia, and so more and more we started taking on different projects. So we worked in the Chittagong hill tracts of Bangladesh, where there's a lot of discrimination against the local Buddhist community. We worked in Ladakh. We worked in Nepal, and we even did a bit of work in Tibet, you know, helping set up libraries to preserve kind of Buddhist culture and texts and stuff like that. However, there's something about this idea of compassion kind of responding to suffering wherever it occurs and however it occurs. And there was a point really in Karuna's history where the emphasis slightly changed. So you could say, you know, Buddhism was the entry point and the starting off point, and it was the point of connection for us as Buddhists, connecting with other Buddhists who were suffering. But, you know, when you're in South Asia, it's not just Buddhists who are suffering, and the poorest, most marginalized communities weren't necessarily Buddhists. So, you know, we started working with manual scavenging communities, so the ones that their caste duty is to, I mean, it's like caste slavery, basically, to clean human excrement, you know, from the dominant caste in the village, and helping activist organizations that support people, women mainly, to get out of that work and employ them in other dignified livelihoods. These are tribal communities. These are all my projects, by the way, as well. So these are tribal communities that you know, have been criminalized under. It's a complex history, but basically they're regarded as criminal. They're treated similarly to maybe like Gypsy or Roma communities here, you know, like they live really on the margins of society. If there's any crimes committed, they're the first to get blamed. So lots of these tribal communities, ex-criminal tribes that we work with. in Bihar, the historical kind of birthplace of Buddhism, we work with communities that I guess you would now call Hindu. So here's some women making, I think it's organic pesticide, or might be fertilizer, can't really tell. It's normally always just a big brown sludge. But yeah, working to grow organic vegetables for, you know, and therefore have secure kind of dignified livelihoods. And then tribal communities that we work with, again, in historic Buddhist areas, but these are actually communities that are, they kind of have a fusion of like Christianity and their tribal religion, which is really interesting to be around. But you know, like they have this incredible relationship with the forests that they live in, and we do work that supports them to be able to maintain that relationship and not have to migrate to the cities for like poorly paid kind of labor work or whatever. So they make, you know, things out of leaf plates and harvest turmeric that grows in that area and so forth. Kind of most significantly, I think, I don't know, for me anyway, is that we work with Dalit Muslim communities now as well. And Muslims are having a, you know, as people probably aware, have a harder and harder time in the world today, in many parts of the world, and especially in India. And, you know, people don't really talk about kind of Dalit Muslims because, well, there's, you know, within the Muslim community and more broadly, people that have vested interests in not kind of talking about these communities, but, you know, they're communities that are ostracized and treated as lesser within the Muslim communities, so including Dalit Muslim, like Muslim manual scavengers, so the equivalent of the Hindu communities that have to clean the human excrement. So people might do that just within the Muslim community and so forth. This is kind of significant. You know, I guess part of what I'm talking about here is the responding compassionately means that Karuna saw Buddhism less and less as a kind of basis for, I mean, it's a heart basis for our work, but it's not like a basis for like determining what kind of work we do, what kind of communities we work with. And I'm trying to tie this to the kind of holding to nothing, whatever, in a way, and sort of like, you know, what is it to be Buddhist and not really grasp at that kind of Buddhist identity in a way that lets compassion lead rather than Buddhism, you know. And it's significant because, you know, Ambedkarite Buddhism and the Tibetan, you know, Buddhism are not the only types of Buddhism that are active in the region. So you've got, you know, in Burma, in Myanmar, you have, you know, very active nationalist Buddhist movements that are responsible for a lot of violence against, you know, let's say, for example, the Rohingya Muslim population, considered, I think, by some to be the most marginalized community in the world, probably the most oppressed, you know. And you've got so here's a picture of the Venerable W, people may know, reading an article about himself. And the same in places like Sri Lanka. So this is, again, another sort of I don't know what you call it, kind of right-wing nationalist Buddhist organization meeting. There's violence against other minority religious communities, you know. And in that context, it means something for us to not say that we're Buddhist when working with Muslim communities. Actually, you know, there's an association there, or there's a connotation there that isn't necessarily positive, you know. But later, people come to learn that we're Buddhist, you know, maybe after we've been funding them for a bit, or they develop more of a relationship with us, and they go, huh, that's interesting, okay, yeah, cool, you know. And one thing I always hear from the organizations you know, the activist organizations that we work with, they say, well, you guys are really understanding, you really understand our situation, you know. And I feel like there's something of the Buddhism in that, rather than kind of waving the sort of Buddhist flag, as it were, you know. Most recently, we've been working during lockdown with well, during the coronavirus, you know, with the situation in India where you've got, well, firstly, millions and millions of people were locked down with only 4 hours notice. That meant lots of incredibly impoverished people sort of trapped in their homes with no food, but also millions of migrants stranded, you know, from home with no transport or no means of getting back. So you had this mass reverse exodus across the country, people comparing it to partition, with you know, many millions of people just trying to trek across India to get back to their home villages. Yeah, lots of people dying on the way, lots of you know, we've recorded a lot of suicide and so forth, you know, taking place in that journey, and we're just responding as much as we can, you know. So got a big fundraising effort going on here. Singhashri, I know through her meditations that fundraisers, has collected over, you know, her and her friends over £5,000, I think, and which is amazing. And altogether, we've so far reached over 50,000 people with the £200,000 we've raised. But you know, so a lot more we're trying to do. But again, just totally indiscriminate in a way with regard to the backgrounds of the people we're helping. You know, as long as they look like they need help, and all these migrants, you know, you can imagine it's incredibly poor, hand-to-mouth existence, and you know, very, very difficult lives. So yeah, that's Karuna, and that's kind of our movement. You know, we're still a Buddhist organization, but in a slightly different way to how we used to be. And I just end on you know, and we don't lead with our Buddhism, I guess. We don't hold to the Buddhism in that sense. I'll just finish with one thing here, which is another nice kind of Dharma quote. So I heard this from Jan Willis talking about, she says this is from Nagarjuna. Jan Willis, a sort of scholar of Vajrayana Buddhism in America. And she said there's 4 things, Nagarjuna says there's 4 things by which you can tell a true, genuine bodhisattva. So bodhisattva being someone who led by compassion, we could say, you know. And the first is, Bodhisattva works for the Dharma, not for personal benefit. The second is the Bodhisattva works to develop virtues, like virtuous qualities, not fame. The third is the Bodhisattva works for all others, not for themselves. And the fourth is they do all of this in secret. So I was always very moved by that and very touched by that idea. I don't actually know if it is Nagarjuna, because it's from a Chinese text. They sometimes mix up Nagarjuna and Shantideva, but anyway. So I just think this is really beautiful, and there's something of this in Karuna's work, where we're really led by Karuna, Buddhist values or whatever, but you know, that's kind of secret as well. Yeah, so I hope that was interesting or helpful or linked in some way to the topic.
Wow. Thank you so much, Keval. That was just what a really lovely experience. Really, really lovely to hear about Karuna, and that very clear message there, that it's not coming from being a Buddhist. It's coming from compassion and the idea of letting compassion lead. And it was lovely to see all the different sorts of people that Karuna are currently working with as well. So it was an education for me, but it was also a real inspiration. That really to sort of, I guess, look at what it is that's really motivating us to act, you know. So yeah, let's give Keval a lot of appreciation and thanks for taking the time to share with us all those beautiful pictures. I love the pictures; they were gorgeous. Fabulous. So we're going to take a 5-minute break now, 5-minute comfort break. So by my rights, that means we will be starting up at exactly 12:31. So I'll see you back here at 12:31, and we'll be kicking off with Karim's talk then. Okay, welcome back from our break. Now we're going to move on to our third speaker of the event, which is Karim Manji. I was fortunate enough to be facilitating a panel with Karim at the Green Earth Awakening last September, when we were all still able to actually be around each other physically, be in the same space and sit close to each other, and all of those things that now seem incredibly unavailable. Very unusual times that we're in. So it's really lovely to see Karim again. And Karim will be giving us a talk titled Deep Despair, Deep Love. So over to you, Karim. Welcome.
Thank you, Karim Manji. When I was asked about this talk, you know, I gave a title, and then sometimes I don't know if it ever happens when you say something, and you come back to it a little while later, and you're like, really? That sounds quite grandiose, huh? Let's see what I can do. So just to introduce myself, I practice with, or I have practiced for, been quite involved with a group called Wake Up London for quite a few years, which is in the Plum Village. We practice in the Plum Village tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. And I spent some time in the middle of that period living in Plum Village, and I guess that kind of spiritual lineage might have some influence in what I share. I just had a couple of questions because I really like to just get a little sense of who I'm talking to. So for those who have video or could just pop their video on for just a minute. Oh, I think you could also possibly do this with the reaction and a thumbs up. Could you just let me know if you are at least a little bit aware of Thich Nhat Hanh or Plum Village? If you could put your hand up and keep it up, because I just have to. Okay, so most people that I can see, great. And then the second question is, how many people would identify themselves in a very broad sense as a activist of some kind or another? That is, yeah, slightly less, but it looks like the majority of people. So my biggest fear is just to tell people things that they already know. So the deep despair part, I mean, just in that little, just that one thing, one country that Keval was talking about in India and what's happened recently, I think if we bring this awareness that we cultivate and really sink into what that must have, like just one person's experience in that 4-hour lockdown experience, and multiply that, you know, if we really imagine what people felt and how they suffered and are suffering in one, and then know that is many people, and we know that is just one country at the moment. And if we take a look at, I read recently the essay, and there's a book based on it, The Uninhabitable Earth, and it you know, it talks about what we have in store if we carry on the route we are going. Of course, like we know, or a lot of us will know, that climate change is already a very real reality for many people in the global south, and we see how many more people are going to be affected on our current trajectory. And then if in our head, when I put, okay, we can do something about that, but it's quite huge what we need to do, and then we put that next to the fact that people have been killed in France and in the US in disputes over wearing a mask because of COVID. We just see, for me, I see like, oh, yeah, there's change that seems to be needed if we want to avoid much more suffering. There's, even in arguably more simple things that we could do, there we are still, you know, we still see lots of resistance. I'm, part of me, there's shame to say that I didn't really, even as a person of color, understand the full extent of racial injustice in the world until recently. And I'm really grateful for the real kind of visceral videos that were shared in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, which was just the latest in so many tragic deaths. And just to see the raw emotion that people were feeling, and reality looks like. So when we take all of this together, I guess that's where the first part of that title came from. I think there is arguably enough food there for to feel some despair, and I think that's natural. I think that's normal. And my question for myself recently is, well, and for the period is, what do we do? Where do we go with that? I mean, I think one tactic, I think maybe it's less available to us if we practice with awareness, but I think one tactic for many people, we are given enough tools to numb ourselves, to distract ourselves, or maybe the struggles of just a job and life keeps us too busy to really kind of worry and care. And that's fair enough. I don't, I think that's just where people feel. It's not a judgment, that's the response. It's just a reality that's the response. It's understandable. But there's maybe even sometimes a temptation just to, even if if we understand the extent of it, to just shrug our shoulders and say, well, what can we do? I think that's where the other part comes in. Fierce love. What does a loving, compassionate response look like right now? Or what's one possibility, or some possibilities of what that response looks like? I feel grateful for to discover a teacher like Thich Nhat Hanh. I think his life already put him in this situation of having to combine Buddhist practice with really tough, challenging situations, particularly in the war in Vietnam. He said, he's known for this term, engaged Buddhism, amongst other people. But he said at one point, engaged Buddhism is just Buddhism. You can't stay in the meditation hall when the bombs are dropping. So he really found himself in that situation of societal suffering and felt it was important to respond. So I feel that there is, I feel grateful that there is these lessons of how to combine this awareness of our body, of our breathing, in the midst of taking action. One of the things we were talking about at the panel at Green Earth Awakening was nonviolent direct action. At that point, we'd had the April rebellion last year, and then in October, I found myself kind of more involved with Extinction Rebellion. One of the things I was doing was non-violence and de-escalation. I thought to myself, I practice meditation. I'm a calm guy. I can help keep things kind of calm and peaceful in the midst of a rebellion. This is quite people kind of making a stand, and there's a chance for conflict here. And it really taught me something about the energies that are involved when people, there's a lot of beauty in Extinction Rebellion for me. There's also a lot wrong, not to shy away from that, a lot wrong. But there's a lot of beauty when people are really coming together with deep love in their heart and a deep desire to want to do something, and putting their liberty and their time and you see what it can do to people's emotions, and you receive that when you're there trying to calm things down. And I could just feel my nervous system was fried. Every day I came back from doing nonviolence and de-escalation, I learned some humility about my ability to practice. But it also taught me, there was some really, really beautiful moments where you just, some people had a lot of anger, say, towards the police. And one time I just was talking to a guy and trying, because we didn't want even a nonviolent atmosphere. We don't even want anger to be projected, because that takes us towards the possibility where there is violence. As he was talking, and yes, but they're doing this, and yes, but they're doing that, and it just unraveled into this kind of deep sadness that was underneath the anger. And he asked, and there was a poem that he'd written, and he asked to just kind of read it to me, and there was a real depth of connection there. That so when we see the response on the outside, there's many layers to what we're feeling, and what's going on. And I feel one example of a compassionate, fiercely loving response is this idea of non-violent direct action, where people come together. And as well as the de-escalation, I found myself, I chose to be arrested on, I think it was basically the last day of the October rebellion. And again, this was another opportunity to learn about my practice. I think I had this really, again, I thought, I know how to breathe. I know how to enjoy the present moment. I will just go and be in the cell, and I will just breathe, and that will be fine. And then when you have a door closed on your own in the police van, and it was like, I hadn't really thought this through, that this is a door that I cannot open. And there was just something I really felt in my body that was, oh no, I'm kind of trapped, I'm stuck. And it was a chance. I remember doing walking. It wasn't as easy as I thought, but it was still possible to do walking meditation up and down the cell while I was waiting, to even maybe channel the spirit of Buddhafield and do a bit of a dance at some point. And there was also moments I just was horrible, it was terrible, but it was possible. And I think it was also quite, to bring the practice into that situation. It all came thick and fast at the end of last year, because I knew I needed to rest and take care of myself. I think that is part of fierce love. It's fierce love for ourselves, and knowing when is too much, when we need to rest, being okay, being okay to say no to things. I did, however, feel the election was like, oh, we won't get this chance for some time. So I kind of pushed my, and again, but there's still something, I think, so beautiful and heartwarming, even though it was, in the end, it wasn't the result that I wanted. I won't get into politics, but just seeing so many people come together, and push themselves out of their comfort zone. I remember knocking on a door, and I found it terrifying, because who's going to answer? They're going to be angry at you. What are they going to say? And then just having to breathe, knock and then breathe. And I think I had the number of breaths that I would wait as well, because you didn't know if people weren't answering or weren't in. And so each kind of door knocking in the election could be a meditation practice, and it's very different to sitting meditation. And I remember just on the election day, I think I was in West Brom, and it was pouring it down with rain, and these things of where to vote were like disintegrating the moment we got them out of the plastic. And yet you just, the night before you stay, somebody had put you up in their house, and you go into this, you come out from around, and you come into this like warmth and this feeling of togetherness of people that were, on the same page doing the same thing. So yeah, these are a little bit of experiences of where to move forward, what we could do. And I don't know, I think one thing that helped me to find energy, or to find a kind of inspiration to act, is seeing the part of my mind that wanted to solve everything and to make it all okay. And that was also, I think, connected with the part of my mind that had this idea of kind of how things should be. People, we should all have basic rights. We should all be treating each other with respect. We should be taking care of the planet. And this is how we should be. And why aren't we? And I think on a retreat, something just clicked in me. It's like, well, that's a nice idea, but actually in many parts of the world and throughout, if we zoom out into time, for much time of human history, that's not how things have been. I guess we have these potentialities in our minds that create the damaging things we see. And just almost to see, like the Buddha said, this is because that is. So just to see that, yes, things are how they are, but there is room we can do something, not trying to fix it all, but just seeing, is there something we can do with climate change? It's every degree or half degree that we stop, there is less suffering there in the world. So it was kind of this, there was an element of letting go, of not holding on to ideas or or ways of seeing, and just finding another way that allowed some energy to come in, to say, yes, there are things that are possible. And I think the other thing as well, maybe, I don't know, how am I doing for time? It's about time, so this is the last thing well, I just finished with this. There's the lines from two last things actually. One is, I think that to just sustain our heart, a fierce love is not, and maybe we know this already. It's just not seeing enemies out there. I watched a documentary recently, White Right Meeting the Enemy, where a woman of color goes and meets very far right individuals in America, and it's hard to watch that documentary and not feel compassion for those people when you look at, and that doesn't mean accepting, of course, their action, but just to see. And it's very easy in a kind of activist world to us and them, and I think as maybe as Buddhist practitioners, if we identify that way, we can be very firm and really strong about about the actions and the outcomes we think cause harm, without condemning the individuals. And the other thing I think is important is just to, I kind of alluded a little bit in some of those stories, is to feel everything. So to be able to really feel deeply the pain and the suffering that's there, but not let that be a reason not to feel joy and happiness, to kind of just experience it all fully, as fully as we can. And there's lines from a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh that go, my joy is like spring so warm, it makes flowers bloom all over the air. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see my joy and pain are one. So I think it is feeling it all, the deep despair, the deep sadness, the deep suffering, and the wonders of Mother Earth, the trees, what is here, that we are actually in this rare, unique, if we just look at it purely historically, this rare, unique time of being, if we feel we're in a position of being a human, where we know we're going to get food, where we know we have roof over our house, where we have air that we can breathe. It hasn't always been that way. It isn't that way for many people, and we don't know how long that will continue. So I think that's a motivation to really kind of take it all in and to enjoy, but also maybe to act as well. So I think that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Karim. That was just absolutely fabulous. There was a quote that you quoted quite early on from Thich Nhat Hanh that I'd not heard. Engaged Buddhism is just Buddhism. you can't stay in the meditation hall when the bombs are dropping. That was just fabulous, really, really fabulous quote there. It was really nice to hear about your experience of what it was like with, you know, working with XR and so on. And I think the sort of exhortation towards the end of just sort of feeling everything just seemed very wise. Yeah, you talked about having seen that you wanted to solve things. You could see how things should be, but that it's not really like that. And that, yeah, so how important it is just to be able to feel everything that's happening. So what a gift. Third in our 3 talks today. So let's give Karim a big verbal thank you for all of his efforts today, giving us this lovely talk. So we have time for questions, and we're due to finish at 1 o'clock, but we do have permission to overrun. So I've checked out with our 3 speakers, and they're happy to overrun. So if you're happy to overrun, stick with us. If you need to leave at 1, then of course we will understand that. I can see some people have actually had to leave already, probably coming up for lunchtime and other commitments, but that's cool. There's still loads of us here. So please put questions in the chat. That would be easiest for me in terms of moderating this. But I am going to switch on to gallery view as well. So I can see what's happening here. So I think somebody did ask Karim to put the name of the documentary in the chat, if possible. That would be great if you are able to do that, Karim, for people. That would be great.
I'll go one better. I'll do a YouTube link. I'll just find it.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant stuff. So, yeah. So does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? And if for some reason typing it up is just too problematic for you, just wave your hand around until I notice you, because there's a lot of you here. So I'm just gonna get looking. Okay, the person who's using the title of Adam Carell, if you want to unmute yourself, come on in and ask your question.
Hi, my name's actually Jane, but I'm using my husband's computer. Hi. Karim, I was just wondering, what do you do when you feel that, like, I always feel that overwhelming sense of like, everything is wrong. I know what would be right. We need to do this. And then I think, I need to do something, and then I don't do anything. I just feel so divided, like I know lots of solutions, but I won't pick one. What do you do?
Karim, over to you.
Sometimes I do the same as you, and I don't do anything. Sometimes when I feel that, I think that's, I think it's very natural. I think Thich Nhat Hanh got asked this question once. There's so many things. What should I do? And he said, you know, just do one thing and do it really well. And I think that sometimes it sounds hard. That's hard, but I think what I've sometimes I have an idea or there's something I want to do, and then I haven't done it, and I see somebody else has done it, I find that really reassuring. So I guess this is a practice for me, but it's just trusting that there are different people in different places doing different things, and I think it's also sometimes it's also maybe distinguishing between what my mind is saying, you should do this, we should do this, and then just there's certain things that you just feel like after the election and XR, it was like, I'm not doing anything for a couple of months. I really need to rest. And then somebody phoned me and said, this is a mindfulness and activism retreat that we're doing at one of the Plum Village centers, and we really want you. And there was just part of me that just couldn't say no. It was just this energy, you know, that there's like, this is aligning with my, so it's maybe sensing into the thing, you know, what are the things, and maybe it needs some stillness to find sometimes what are those things that just, there's a pull and it just happens. And also, although things are urgent, also being, if it takes time to figure out what is the thing, we don't have time, and yet we also have to take time. It's a kind of paradox, I think, if that makes sense.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so I'm just going to scroll through and see if anybody's waving or sticking up a hand electronically or otherwise. See if I can see anybody. I have a question, if not. Just scrolling through. Okay, I have a question that just came in here. And this question is, we have already passed tipping points. Governments are not acting in ways that are adequate. How do you work with despair? I think what I will do as well, so we can speak, we can hear everyone, because we've got some three very wise people here. I'm going to ask everyone to respond to this. I think it's a really very good question. So we've already passed tipping points. Governments are not acting in ways that are adequate. How do you work with despair? So I'll take Singhashri first.
Yeah, it's a great question. I can say for sure my life these days includes quite a lot of despair. So Netflix is great for that. Chocolate, crisps. And then when I feel ready, turning towards and being with a lot of compassion. So yeah, despair is painful. So just noticing like, oh, this is a moment of suffering, really acknowledging that that's us suffering. Suffering in seeing, similar to what Karim was saying, that deep despair, it's there as part of our experience. It's calling for our attention. So can we really let ourselves feel it? Yeah, really. There'll be so many familiar coping mechanisms to deal with it. And then there's the simplicity of feeling it. And then taking care of ourselves in that. So I find connecting with other people really helpful. Talking about it, moving the body, dance. I've been dancing to gospel music lately. That's really helped. Very uplifting. And then also, riffing off of Karim, pleasure is so important in this work. We need to find the things that bring joy and pleasure and really ground in them and give themselves to us and let ourselves fully enjoy them, let ourselves fully have those things. And that is in and of itself a radical act. We live in a world that does not want us to really be joyful, to really be alive, fully alive. So when we give ourselves that, we are, stepping into an act that is revolutionary, not to get, overindulgent, not to feed craving, but just to, that appreciative, feeding that appreciative capacity that we all have. So yeah, that's enough from me.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Keval now, because Keval, with all the projects that you're involved with and, seeing the kind of suffering that you shared with us, how do you work with despair? I mean, the specific question was because we've passed tipping points and governments aren't acting in ways that are adequate. So yeah, you could answer in that sense, or just deal with that. Generally, how do you work with despair? Thank you, Singhashri.
Yeah, I guess in a way, how you work with it is sort of related, isn't it? Regardless of what the kind of cause of the despair is, and all of those things are probably connected, isn't it? Like whatever governments are doing and whatever's happening to people and populations and the planet. To be honest, I'm not sure I have a good answer to this question. I've been thinking about it recently. I've been talking about it with my colleagues, and there is, honestly, for me, like the kind of work we do, I feel like there's an extent to which I've almost become a little bit hardened or desensitized or something, because it's the only way to keep doing it. And I don't know if that's the best thing. It's like a kind of ongoing inquiry and a process for me, where like at the moment what I do is like, maybe, I don't know, if I don't want to be too hard on myself and say instead of feeling the feeling, I do this other thing. But probably what I do is like, right, well, I'm just going to be a really good program manager. I'm just going to raise loads of money for this thing. I'm just going to like make sure this project has all the resources it needs and that we promote it and whatever, for example, in the context of my work. And maybe that's a way also of not deeply feeling the real sort of individual kind of tragedies that are there all the time. More generally, you know, related to the work, but just more generally in the world as well. Like sometimes I think I have the idea that like I have to be guided by my own inner compass, because I don't really think we're in a very hopeful situation with a lot of what's going on in the world, but I just feel like part of Dharma, part of whatever, you know, Buddhist ethics or understanding of the mind is like you have to act in accordance with your own values in order to feel contented in this world, in order to feel like, you know, the best way that you can feel okay is to act according to your own highest values or whatever, and then obviously like interrogate them and cultivate other good mental qualities and so forth. So I just sort of feel like no matter how hopeless it is, I can only do what I do anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, just things get hopeless, like I'm still going to have to help people and still contribute positively. You know, like I can't do anything else. So yeah, it's probably not a full answer, but that's my personal answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting answer because like you're in a position where you can make a difference because of your job. So that idea of channeling energy into practical things that you feel you're like, you've got agency in that. I think that's also interesting as well, isn't it? It's like, yeah, yeah. I know that's not all of what you said, but that's what stuck out to me. Karim, I'm aware you might feel like you've already answered this. I'm not sure, but would you like to also pitch in?
Yeah, if that's okay. I mean, it's a big topic, but yeah, there's a couple of things that I would like extra that I would like to say. One is this: is that I actually just read very recently an article by 3 members of XR scientists, and they had a bit of a critique of. So there's a deep adaptation paper by Jem Bendel, and Jem spoke at Green Earth Awakening. And I think he's pretty much of the view that we have, you know, near-term societal collapse is inevitable. It was very interesting for me to read this paper that they weren't painting a rosy picture of climate science by any stretch of the imagination, but they didn't feel, and these are 3 scientists, and in their review, they didn't feel that we're quite at that stage of inevitability. I mean, I think unless we have a big change, that you know, that is, and I can see why it does feel despairing when you think about what's needed for that big change. So I just want to put that it's not the tipping point thing is open. I don't know. We might have passed tipping points, but it's not as clear cut maybe as it sometimes seems. I mentioned this in the talk at Buddhafield last year. Again, it's leaning on Thich Nhat Hanh's inspiration. There's this video of him. It's an interview with the environmentalist David Suzuki, and it's quite old. It's maybe 10, 20 years, maybe 20 years, 15 years old. And he's saying, we have to accept that our human civilization is impermanent. All civilizations, they come, they arise, they are for some time, and then they go. And we are no different as humans. And maybe we're going to make that happen a lot sooner than we think. But you know, and for me, I think I've kept coming back to that, accepting our impermanence. And once you do, and he's saying this with this kind of real, like kind of almost a smile, he's like, then we can have the energy to act, he says, talking about the impermanence of our species. And somehow I feel that accepting this acceptance on one level, and you could argue that is quite a despairing way to see it, but I think it opens up space for, and again, as everyone else has said, feeling the despair, but I think the acceptance of one level of impermanence allows scope to play in the space where we do have agency and we do have choice. And, you know, every degree or half degree, as I mentioned, makes a difference. So there's even, I also think of what happens when people are diagnosed, I haven't, you know, with a terminal illness, and they are told they have 3 months to live. What I've heard is that often people really take those moments, those 3 months, and they live their fullest life, fuller than the however many years that went before it. I don't know, somebody might have a more visceral experience of that than me. But I feel, so I feel that despair is so real, but there's space within that of whatever is going to unfold. There is still suffering right in front of us. There is still things that we can do right here. I feel, that acceptance, and that, and then looking at where there is hope, for something, even if it's not for the future we expected, you know, for our planet. And the last thing was just that, again, in this deep time perspective, the other thing that shifted something for me is Thich Nhat Hanh said, well, the earth will regenerate. Us humans might not be here, and it might take millions of years, but the earth will regenerate itself. And that was another thing that just kind of shifted the perspective a little bit.
Oh, great answers. 3 really, really great answers. Really, really great. So we could wrap up now. I haven't had any other questions come in, and I'm sure we're probably all a bit hungry. Well, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm hungry. All I've got is my experience. Got no idea what's going on with you. I am hungry. It's been an absolute delight sharing this space with all of you. An honor to facilitate these 3 very experienced, gifted, and loving humans. What a fabulous thing to be able to hear from your experience, and I think we've all probably taken a lot from this session today. So thank you again. Let's do a thank you again to Keval, Singhashri, and Karim. And I hope you all continue to enjoy Buddhafield in the web, all the different sessions that are happening, the dancing, the music, the meditation, the talks, and other closed sessions that are happening as well around the space. So all done. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to close it all down, and we can I'll pop you all into gallery view. Those of us who've still got our cameras on, just wave to each other. Thank you very much. See you all very soon.